Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another meeting of the Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. My name is Mike Kanakis, and tonight is November 6th. We are getting together for another meeting of our wonderful group to talk about all things PowerShell. I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Phil Bossman. How are you today, Phil?
I'm doing well tonight, thanks. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so I have a question for you, Phil.
Mhm.
You and I have been doing this user group for a long time. Do you have any idea how long we've been doing this user group?
Well over 9 years.
Yeah. And in 9 years, we've seen a lot of cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
So my question to you is, how the hell do you remember all this stuff? How do you remember all the cool tips that we see when we meet these meetings?
I'm really not sure. I'm getting old in my age, and so I think I wanna reach out to some people to see if I can, get a tip or something that can really, tweak the skill set, and,
You want
I
you
certainly
want to
think I
phone a
wanna
friend?
I think I will
Did
phone a friend. "Hey,
did did
I know
somebody
a guy."
mention PowerShell tips? Yeah, I got
Yes.
something for you.
Hey,
Okay.
look who it is! Dan
"Hey,
Schroeder.
Hey guys.
this is
Dan,
the
thanks for just
PowerShell
hanging
community, just
around.
knowing exactly what you need and going, I know a guy. Boom,
Yeah,
there he is.
I think you guys said like PowerShell tips 3 times, and that just like I've just felt it, right? And I'm like, I need to join. I need to be there.
I
Just to be
also
there.
clicked my heels underneath the desk, so that's probably why. So Dan, help us out. We're trying to figure out how we could remember all these wonderful tips that we come across in our day-to-day work with PowerShell. Do you have any ideas of what might be able to help us out?
Yeah, so I wrote a PowerShell module for exactly that. And yeah, I'm going to talk about it for the next 45 minutes or so here. So yeah, you can sit back and just watch and learn and ask any questions that you have along the way.
How incredibly unplanned and random is that? I mean, what's the chance that a guy would just show up and talk about PowerShell tips at a
See?
PowerShell tips meeting at a user group? Wow, that's amazing. How did we pull that off? All right, so listen, let's put all the fun aside. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Dan Schroeder. He's going to be talking about his module that he created called Tips, which is a module that you can install. And I won't spoil it all, but it's a module you can install, and it basically will give you factoids, tips, helpful articles, and things to help you do your job better right at your console prompt. And so, Dan, why don't you tell people a little bit about your background and how you got started with this?
Sure. I'll just go ahead and share my screen if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I actually I will talk about how I got into this module and why I made it, but that's going to be sort of near
Sure.
the discussion. So,
So,
but yeah,
I'm just curious. So we'll turn it over to you, and you can do your thing. But essentially, I'm guessing that you had the brilliant idea here that hey, look at all this stuff I'm creating. I wish there's a way I could recall it. And so maybe that's a good lead in to this module, and maybe we'll just hand it over to you. We just want to say thanks for sharing some knowledge with us tonight, and take it away.
well, yeah, awesome. So thanks, Mike. Yeah, my name is Daniel Schroeder. Just gonna jump ahead. Oh, and yeah, today I'm gonna talk about my tips module that I created probably a year and a half ago now. It's been a little while. Um, and yeah, so I guess what I'm going to talk about in the next 45 minutes is I'll just do a little bit of intro about myself and just some other things that I've made, just that you guys might find interesting or helpful. After that, we'll dive into doing a demo of the tips module so you can see sort of exactly what it is, how it works, how to use it, have some discussion around that. Then I'll show how you guys can contribute your own tips to the tips module so that you can have your tip shared with everyone who has the module installed. Um, and then, barring how much time there is at the end, I'll just go over some lessons that I learned while building tips. And then, yeah, as I sort of mentioned, we'll talk about the tips origin story, actually, like what gave me the idea to come up with this thing. And then we'll wrap up after that. Yeah, so who am I? My name's Daniel Schroeder. I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I work at an awesome company called IQ Metrics. I've been a software developer for over 2 decades. So since around, I don't know, 1999, I think I started writing code. I have my own blog. I've been blogging for over a decade as well. Yeah, and I basically just love all things .NET and PowerShell related, and love automation. Automating things is really sort of what I do in my spare time. It's just what I really enjoy doing. So.
All right. So Dan, listen, I'm I've been dying to ask this question since we talked about getting together. What the hell is this picture? I've been curious about this since I saw it the very first time I saw you online. Give me the story about your portrait there.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's I don't know, just kind of dumb. I was a young dumb teenager in this picture. It's probably like 20 years old, and maybe I was like around 20 or 22 or something. It was just me and my wife, girlfriend, fiance at the time, just going to the park to feed the ducks. And we went out and bought a bunch of bread, and we were just goofing around. And I threw the buns on my fingers. We snapped this photo, and it's just been my social media profile ever since. So uh, yeah,
I
that's the
love it.
story behind it.
I love it. I wish you would have went with how Stephen Judd described it. He said this is how you roll code. Oh,
The roles, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's great. I will say I've since learned you don't want to feed the ducks buns. That's actually not good for them. Go for corn or peas or something instead. But we were young and dumb at the time. We just fed them bread because that's what we had seen on TV. So yeah, yeah. So that's the story behind that picture. So yeah, some things that I've made. I mentioned I do have a blog. One of my most popular posts is something PowerShell related. I'll just open it up here quick. Um, it's just about providing a batch file to run your PowerShell scripts from. And I wrote this post back in 2013, so you can see I've been blogging about PowerShell stuff for quite a while. But essentially, it all boils down to this 4 lines of code. And I'll actually just do a really quick demo. So here we just have some simple hello.ps1 PowerShell script. You can see it takes a single parameter, an optional message. So hello research triangle PowerShell user group. It just writes the message to the screen and then prompts you to exit, right? And if I open that up here's that same file. And so um, I had a problem back in the day. I was helping support out where we needed to like email clients some PowerShell scripts to run. We would send them the script, and they would double click on it. And what do you think would happen? It would open up in an editor, right? If I double click
Sure.
this, yeah, it doesn't actually run my script. It actually jumps back to VS Code and opens it up in the editor. And so all this is doing is, so here we have our hello.ps1. In the same directory, I have this run hello.cmd. So this is our batch file. The blog post gave us these 4 lines of code. The only thing special about this is hello ps1. That's just the name of the PowerShell script we want to run. And so it just allows you to double click this and it'll go and run hello.ps1, and it opened up on my other monitor. But there it is, hello research triangle PowerShell user group. We can also right click on it, and I do happen to have the run with PowerShell option, but it doesn't always seem to be there depending on like which version of Windows you're on. I don't know if it shows up in Windows 11. I haven't tried it out, but like I said, I wrote this thing back in 2013, but this is still today one of my most popular blog posts, so people are still finding it useful. So if you guys have PowerShell scripts that you need to send to, I'll say, like non-tech savvy people or non-PowerShell people, even a lot of the like .NET developers that I work with, they've never used PowerShell, and so they don't know how to run it and whatnot. So this is just a nice alternative if you want to send them a script and make it easy for them to run it.
All right. So Dan, when we were chatting, and I told you, I said this is a pretty vocal group, lots of questions, and so
Perfect.
for the people watching at home, this is the reason to come and join us in person. You get to ask the questions. So already an eagle-eyed attendee has spotted. Gilbert wants to know, how did you get your commit status in the title of Windows Explorer there? Your repo status, it looks like.
It's a great question. I think it's Git extensions. So if I right click, you'll see there's this git extensions. And then, so I could even like do a git commit if I made changes to these files. I could do a git commit right from here, and it would open up a window, and I could stage my changes. So yeah, if you want to use it, it opened up on another window. But yeah, so here I have my PowerPoint that I've changed. So you can stage it, you can write your commit message, type stuff, but you just install this, and it installs all the Windows Explorer extensions, I believe.
So,
I'm pretty
so
sure this is what
essentially,
does it.
essentially, you have a Git client installed outside of VS Code that is basically
Yes.
doing that. Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, if you just do like a Google search for Git extensions, you'll find it. You can download the MSI installer or use WinGet or whatever chocolatey to install it as well. And it, yeah, hooks into the Windows Explorer for the integrations. So,
All right. I promise no more interruptions for at least 2 minutes.
all right, perfect. No, I love it. Ask away. So yeah, if we hop back to the slides, why I got into software development in the first place is I wanted to make video games like a lot of people or a lot of kids when they're young. And so I did get my master's degree at the university, but part of that was creating a particle system framework. Particle systems are just things in video games used to do special effects like smoke, fireworks, sparks, that type of thing. But anyways, I created this open source thing that could be used with X and A, it doesn't really matter. You could use it for Xbox and Windows games essentially, and Windows Phone games. But I'm just mentioning this because open source is super important to me. I like everything I build pretty much is open source on GitHub. You can go find the code, you can leave comments, issues, feature, pull requests. But so this one actually was one of my more popular ones, and I got the biggest donation I've ever got. So I never, like I said, everything's open source. I don't charge for any of my software, but I do have a donate link. And I did have one independent game development company donate $500 to me, which, you know, at the time that was like huge. Like, yeah, I've never had a donation bigger than that. Usually like they're like $5, maybe $10 here or there. But anyways, I've created a Windows Task Scheduler Azure DevOps extension. So if you guys are still deploying scheduled tasks for any of your apps that you create, like deploying a scheduled task to a Windows server somewhere, there's Azure DevOps Pipelines. This Azure DevOps pipeline extension that I wrote that you can use to automate that. So it'll install the Windows scheduled task for you. You can start it up, disable it, uninstall it, all that type of thing. I have this path link checker app, which this is my most popular thing on GitHub, my most popular project. It's super simple. It's really dumb. All you do is you give it a path, like a directory, and it looks for all the files and directories in there and tells you how long the path is, right? And so the whole reason this thing exists is I ran into the Windows limitation of a 260 character limit in your paths. And this could quickly tell you if you had any files that were going over 260. So this one you can see down here, there is one path that's 264 characters. I'm only mentioning this because it's my most popular or most starred thing, I'll say, on GitHub. And it started out as a PowerShell script, something, and it's not overly complicated or anything. It's just like this little PowerShell script that tons of people have found super useful. And I just made this thing thinking, you know, this is a dumb little utility. No one's going to ever use it. But people love it. So I'm just throwing that out there because like if you've thought of creating something, but you're like, no one will find this useful, or it just solves this really simple problem. Don't let that stop you. You know, go in, just make it, put it up on GitHub or wherever open source, and yeah, just see what comes. Because oftentimes it's, you know, it's the simplest little apps that are the most, maybe have the most impact or impact the most people. All right, I'm going to jump back here. Couple other things I've made. So these were also PowerShell modules that I built a long time ago, back when people built .NET Framework apps instead of .NET Core apps. But this would just allow you to build .NET applications. It runs MS Build. This would allow you to create NuGet packages, which are essentially the like C# equivalent of the PowerShell gallery modules. And then the last thing I'll maybe call out is I do have another repo here, the PowerShell.script module repository template. This is just if you want to create a new PowerShell script module, but you starting from nowhere, starting from scratch, you can just go clone this repo, and it'll just sort of give you the base template to start from, where you already have your PSM1 file. It's got a dummy function in there. It's got a pester test to run it. It has the GitHub Actions pipeline all hooked up. So as soon as you commit a change, it'll push it out to the gallery. So you can go check that out if you're interested. Okay, let's move on and actually talk about why I got summoned by you guys talking about PowerShell tips 3 times. Yeah, let's take a look at the tips module. Oh, it's going to go ahead and close this. Okay, so here's just my regular PowerShell prompt. Actually, I guess before we even dive into this, we'll just go take a look at the GitHub page. So this is the URL, github.com/deadlydog/PowerShell.tips. If you just search for, PowerShell tips module or Deadly Dog tips, it should show up. But if you scroll down, the README I've tried to be as thorough as possible. Talks about what the module is for. It's basically just for giving you tips about, PowerShell features, best practices, cool new modules, maybe keyboard shortcuts, editor extensions, things that'll help you with your own PowerShell development, any PowerShell community events. It's just made to sort of serve up these tips to you in your terminal. And so, yeah, that's why it exists, is basically instead of you having to go look for tips, which are scattered all over the internet, these tips come to you in your terminal. So this is just some screenshots of what it looks like. I'm going to demo this in a second. What I actually want to scroll down to is the quick start. And so if you want to do this on your own computer as you're watching right now, basically you can just go copy these 3 lines of code, paste them into your terminal, and this will install tips and set it up to give you a new tip in your terminal every day. So every morning when you open up your PowerShell prompt, you'll have a tip waiting for you. And so let's see what that actually looks like. Okay, so I'm not actually going to, I already have it installed, so I'm not going to run that. And I'm actually not going to run these 3 commands right now. I'm going to sort of walk you through the tips module itself is pretty simple. There's not a lot to it. And so I'm going to walk you through the different features of it that like maybe you wouldn't use, but show you why you would use them.
This is a reminder.
Sorry, I got my Alexa's reminding me to take my vitamins.
That's important.
It is important as I get older, for sure. Yes. So for you, if you want to just copy that, paste those 3 lines into your terminal, and you're done. But what I'm going to show,
Something went wrong.
I'm just going to show something slightly different here.
This is a reminder.
Oh,
Take your
geez.
vitamins.
Okay. I think it's done.
If you need to,
This
if
is
you
a
need to
reminder.
correct that, we can
Take your vitamins.
edit this out.
No, we'll keep rolling with it. Yeah,
we're interested in your health, so make sure you get your vitamins in.
Okay, so yeah, so if I was just starting from scratch, I could run this command, install module. That's the wrong module. It should be tips, not dumps. That's a different module that I've started and haven't gotten back to in a long time. But yeah, install module tips, scope current user, do that. It'll download it from the PowerShell gallery, install it. Once you have that, the primary command that you're going to run is write PowerShell tip. And let's move this back up. And it's just going to write a PowerShell tip for you. So you can see this one. Oh, this is maybe bad form. It's telling us to join the Pacific PowerShell user group. I did not plan this. The tips are random, I swear.
Well, luckily, we like that group.
So yeah, we can call that function again. We'll get a different tip back. So this one's talking about using get child item to easily see environment variables. So if you do this sort of syntax, get child item env, it'll spit out all the environment variables on your machine. I'm not going to demo that because it might spit out environment secrets that I don't want on a recording. So, but feel free to do that on your own. If you don't want to type out the right PowerShell tip command all the time, it does have an alias, which is just tips. So you can just type tips instead, and it'll serve up another one. So this one, again, just letting you know that there's a PowerShell.org YouTube channel where they serve up videos. Let's see a few more tips. What's this one about? Assigning array items to variables in one line. So yeah, you can see there's lots of different categories of tips. So the ones above, like this was a community tip. This one is a syntax tip. It's about like different ways to actually do things in PowerShell, what the syntax supports. If I scroll back up, here's the native commandlet. It's just talking about get child item, which is a native commandlet. It's not an external module or anything, and just showing you what you can do. And so you can see sort of the form of all of the tips is they have a title, they have a category, they have a body. That's what the white part here is. This is just describing it. The yellowish text is example code. And then the green on the bottom is links to where you can go for more information. And then I recently also added an author so you can see who added the tip. Yeah, so I'll actually show this. So like that's pretty much that's all you would typically do with tips. Like it's there to give you a tip. And so that's how you can have it give you a tip. But let's see what other commands it supports. So we can do get command, module tips. And so this is actually a neat trick I didn't know until I picked it up from James Brundage. Huge shout out to him. He was actually, I guess I forgot to have it on my introduction slide. I'm also a PowerShell and DevOps MVP now, and I wanted to give a huge shout out and kudos to James Brundage for nominating me. And it was at the PowerShell DevOps and Global Summit last year. I saw him do this little trick just to see all the commands in a module. So you can do this whenever you install a new module. Maybe their documentation on their website isn't great, or maybe they don't have proper help docs or whatever. You can do this to quickly see all of the functions and aliases that they expose. So here you can see where's the alias that I used. I just typed tips instead of typing out write PowerShell tip. But we can see there's a few other things to do here. So we did write PowerShell tip, and that's where it sort of writes it to the screen in the nicely formatted and nicely colored. I say nice because like I tried to make it look nice, but I'm no designer. I would love if someone could maybe, it would be great if we could like sort of theme how tips look and that type of thing. But as of today, we cannot do that yet. But yeah, so other things you can do is you can do get PowerShell tip. And so this is just like write PowerShell tip, only it gets it in like the pipeline format or as an object. Instead of just writing it to the host, it actually returns us back a proper PowerShell object. So you can see the created date when the tip was created. It's got the title, the tip description that we talked about, or the text. It's got the example, the URLs. This was the more information, the category it belongs to. If you want to get back all the tips, there is switch for that. So we can say get PowerShell tip all tips. And so you can see here, there's a few, quite a few returned back, but let's actually go ahead and do get member on this. And we can see it actually returned us back an ordered dictionary. So it's just an ordered dictionary. That's why they're all in chronological order of the tips that we have. And if we want, we can see how many tips are in the module currently by looking at the count. So there's currently 55 tips in the module. I try to add modules. I was adding them daily or weekly. I sort of fell off that train over the summer, but I'm going to start trying to add more tips. And what I really would love, though, is the community for you guys to start adding your tips. I'll demo that a little bit later on how you can add your own tips, but I would love to get more people involved. I think there's been 5 or 6 different people who have contributed tips, and that's awesome. But if we could get even more traction on that, it's more information to share with everybody, get different perspectives of things that they find useful.
So Dan, let me ask you. So I love this. I just installed the module, playing around with it as we speak, and it's very useful. And so, do you have sort of an idea or a thought process about what you feel is worthy of being a tip that goes in here, or it's just a collection of things that you found useful?
I have a very low bar because of because something that I might not find useful, other people might find very useful, right? Everyone's at different stages along in their PowerShell career or their PowerShell experience. So yeah, I've never rejected a tip. at all because of that, right? It might be a beginner tip, but that's completely fine. I'm hoping beginners do install this module and it helps them learn. And so I don't want to block block any tips really that people would find helpful from being contributed. So yeah, anything goes.
So you accept all tips. So Phil, there's even hope for you. You can probably get in the module. He's not listening probably if he's
I
smart.
dream, I dream.
Okay,
So yeah, so I think this is an awesome opportunity for community members to pitch in. I would say um, most of the members that attend our user group probably submit 5 or 10 tips on their own, just from the experience level of most of the people that attend. So there's a huge path here to follow to really expand this module and make it quite a useful module on top of what is already there.
yep, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess just continuing. I guess the next thing you might want to do is, typing tips to get a tip is nice and handy. It's easy, but you have to remember to do it. Again, one of the things I wanted with this module is I wanted tips to come to you, not for you to have to go find them. And that's where this setting the tips configuration comes into play. And so it has a couple options. You can say how often you want to write the PowerShell tip. So here it's specified for daily, but you could also do every session. So every time a PowerShell prompt opens up, you can have it deliver a tip, or weekly. Just going to leave that on daily. And then similarly, how often the module should update itself. And it has to update itself to get new tips. And so that's right now, I leave it as weekly, but you have a couple options there too: daily, weekly, monthly, bi-weekly. So let's go ahead and set this. And we're going to get a warning. And this is because in order for tips to automatically deliver a tip to your terminal, like right when you open it without you doing anything, you actually have to import it in your PowerShell profile. And that's what it's telling us here. It's saying, hey, to perform automatic actions, you have to import this into the current session, and we can run this add tips import to our PowerShell profile to update it. And so if you didn't know, PowerShell has a built-in variable called profile, and it spits out sort of the default profile that PowerShell is going to run every time you open a new terminal. That's not entirely true, though, because there's actually 4 different profile paths. And so PowerShell kind of lies here where I said, what is profile? It says it's just a string, but this is PowerShell. It's a dynamic language, which is awesome, which means we can add any properties or methods to it at runtime that we want. And that's exactly what PowerShell, the language, has done here with this specific variable. You can see it has these 4 note properties on it, and these are different paths to different potential profile files that may or may not exist. And so let's open up one. Current user all hosts. Okay, so here's my PowerShell profile. And you might be thinking, well, why isn't there much in here? And it's because, so this is totally an aside, but this is a really handy trick if you're doing Windows PowerShell and PowerShell 7 development. Both of those have their own PowerShell profile files, and instead of adding all of your code to one profile and having to remember to keep it in sync and update the other profile, like if you add something to your PowerShell 7 profile, you have to go remember to add that code to your Windows PowerShell profile as well. What I do instead is I just have a single file here, and I dot source that into both my Windows PowerShell profile and my PowerShell 7 profile. And that is actually where all of my common code is. Let's just open that up really quick. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, but you can see I'm setting my posh prompt that we mentioned earlier, installing a couple other modules, terminal icons, and poshgit. But here's tips. This is where I'm importing tips. If I jump back, though, sorry, let's just go back to this profile and bring up our PowerShell prompt. So when I ran this set tips configuration, it said, hey, run this add tips import PowerShell profile command to get it added to your profile. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. This was in that quick start, those 3 lines of code. This was the second line in that 3-block code. I'm just going to run that, and you may have noticed what it did. In my PowerShell profile, it added import module name tips. And so that's why it was giving me a warning before, is it didn't know that I was importing this already in my other script. It only checks out those 4 PowerShell profile files. And if it doesn't see this line somewhere in there, it lets you know that, hey, you might not be importing it. So I'm going to go ahead, and that was add tips import to PowerShell profile. There's also a remove. I'm going to run the remove, and you can see it wipes that line out. And so again, I'm not going to have it in this profile because I have it in this .source file already, so I don't need to put it in there. Okay. So now, actually, sorry, I'm going to put it back. And now we'll run our set tips configuration again, and this time I don't get the warning because it does see that import module statement. So everything is hunky-dory and it all just works. So let's go ahead though and change how often we write our tips, because here you can see I'll open up a new terminal window, but because I already got my tip for the day, I have it currently set to give me a tip every day. It's not going to show anything, right? And so I can do get tips configuration. And this just shows me what I currently have things set to. It's going to update automatically every week. It's going to show a tip once a day. And the tip retrieval order is going to show the newest tips first. But let's go ahead and change that. Set tips configuration. Automatically write our PowerShell tip every session. So now that that's changed, and we'll just confirm it. You can see now it's writing every session. Now if I open up another prompt, we're going to get a tip. And if I open up another prompt, we're going to get a tip. Right? So whatever your preference is, I personally don't like showing a tip every time I open the prompt, because a lot of the times when I open up a PowerShell prompt, I'm like in the flow, I'm focused, ready to do a task, and this can distract me from that. So I typically just like to show it once a day. You might prefer once a week. Maybe you do like it on every session. It's up to you. It's personal preference. But you can set.
Yeah, is that a tip from Corey Knox? Is there a way we could filter out Corey Knox tips from our tips, what gets returned?
Hey, with where object, you can filter out whatever you want, right? So
there's a tip.
So is there a way that in the examples, is it actually raw PowerShell, so you can actually like, hey, get me the last tip and get that data, or it might be even a feature request?
Yeah, just get PowerShell tip. So like this will spit out a random one, but yeah, this is a PowerShell object. Like it's, so you could take, assign this to a variable and do .title or whatever you want on it. There's also, what does it take?
Invoke the example.
What's that? Sorry.
I guess you could invoke the example, right? You could just.
Oh, sorry. Yes, were you asking if we get, this here? Right, if we could run that code automatically, is that what you were kind of asking?
Yeah, that's where I was kind of getting to, is like, I'm just thinking like, hey, that'd be kind of cool, and just like, what would it see to actually run that live? Because that's like an example of, what somebody typed, but could you just do the whole thing?
Yeah, let's see. So tip. So here's our tip. Does this one have an example?
No,
this one does not have an example. We'll try a different one.
Oh man.
Nope.
Demo gods.
We'll find one. Man.
So the tips do have an index number, so you could reference a particular index. Like, hey, I want to reference, because you're getting a new one each time.
Yes, if I knew one. So this one does have an example, but I don't know, like, I guess I could, I don't know what'll happen. Let's see, maybe things will blow up. Invoke command and
Or out on those greater thans.
yeah, I don't know, like if, oh yeah, that's gonna mess
Yeah.
stuff up. Yeah,
Yeah. So
but
some of them
theoretically
are
you
not,
could
but
do that and it
yeah.
wouldn't blow up, but yeah.
All right. Well, some of them were just all comments, but you're doing some formatting in the example.
Yeah, so I don't really have like any hard rules on the example. Like this sort of makes it clear that it's like terminal output sometimes or what, like, yeah, I don't have any strict enforcing on what your example looks like. So
Gotcha.
yeah, it's kind of hit or miss, I guess.
It was an interesting idea. I like that idea though. Might do a feature.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
that's
an
very
interesting
cool.
dilemma. I'd like to return the code, but I don't necessarily want to execute the code. So how do you do that? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so there's our tips. I'm just going to close down these extra windows. So I guess maybe the last thing that I'll show, I'm going to remove that additional line since I don't need it and we won't get warnings anymore. But so if you were to uninstall the module, you would want to run this command to remove that import statement. Because if you just uninstall the module, but it still has the import module tips defined in your profile file, you're going to get an error whenever you start a new PowerShell session saying, hey, I can't find the tips module because you uninstalled it. So that's why you need to run this command to pull that line out of your profile. So just a little heads up about that. As for what the data actually looks like,
Hey, before you switch gears there,
yep,
so Gilbert was asking, it's actually a pretty interesting idea. I'll paraphrase what he said. He said, is there a way to get the last tip that I saw? And I sort of took that ahead and said it'd be interesting to have a history variable available for
yes,
the tips thing.
yep, we're gonna get there.
Oh, nice.
So spoiler alert, it's on the roadmap. It's not implemented yet, but yeah, that is a feature request. That's a good one. So maybe just to actually help you understand, like that segues sort of nicely into this to help you understand what this all actually looks like behind the scenes is you can say get tips data directory path. This is where tips is storing all of its data. So it like knows when the last time it gave you a tip was and when the last time it updated itself was. So let's just navigate to that directory. So you can see there's 4 files here. Yeah, this is the last automatic tip written date. So the last time that that it wrote a tip was, today, the 6th. And so probably the most, here's our tips configuration. So this is just showing, it's essentially these values, they're stored in this file. That's how it sort of knows. But the most interesting one is the tip ID is already shown. And so every tip, like you said, does have an ID. It's simply the date that the tip was created or added to the repo, plus the title of the tip. And so it's a unique ID, but this is how it knows which tips it's already shown you. So it won't show you the same tip again until you've gone through all of them and this list has reset. And so when you talked about, hey, could we show the last tip? It should be a pretty simple feature, I think, to implement where I just say, yeah, what's the last line in this file? Go grab the tip with that ID and show it again. So
yeah.
I
think I also want to add is like, hey, can I iterate back through kind of like a PS read line? You can do like a Control R and find the history. Go find me the last tip. Can I iterate through? We could do like a TUI, loop
right.
through. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
and that's cool. Yeah, that's another great suggestion because maybe it was like, oh, there was one I saw 4 days ago, and you just want to, go back 4 times in a row. So yeah, that's a great suggestion. So with that, I think that's pretty much it for the tips demo itself, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and then so I just wanted to open it up here for any other discussion. I love that you've been asking questions along the way. Again, Mike, Phil, thank you for stepping in and asking for the questions in the chat that I have not even looked at. So yeah, I was just curious, does anyone have tips installed already today?
I have it installed. I'm using it as we're talking. Hey, I had a question for you. I had a question for you. So I'm looking at the contributor tip. It's pretty so um, on Dan's GitHub repo towards the end, he's got instructions on how you can contribute a tip. It's a pretty low bar to entry if you have some familiarity with Git. Fork the repo, clone, make a change, commit, make a PR, and then and it goes in. So just a rule of thumb, I guess you're probably looking for one tip per PR to keep it clean, right? That would be
No, it doesn't really matter. If
okay.
people want to submit 5 in one pull request, it's fine by me. Um, yeah, like
Okay.
as long as I don't know, I'll say, I guess maybe my only requirement would be like, keep it family friendly, like no profanity or vulgarity or anything like
Ah,
that. But
now I got to come up with another tip. Damn
you're
it.
out, Mike. Yeah. But other than that, yeah, like if people like, and as long as it's like PowerShell related, obviously, that's I guess the other requirement. But other than those two things, pretty much I'll accept anything. Um, yeah, so I mentioned there was sort of a roadmap. This is just like my short list of things that I would like to do. So the next thing I'm going to do is walk through actually creating a tip. So I'm going to walk through these steps with you guys. You can see what it looks like. But one thing I would like to do is have an easier way to submit tips so you don't have to fork the repo and create a pull request and whatnot. So one idea I've had is using just a GitHub issue, actually, that you could just fill out the GitHub issue with all the fields that we need for a tip. And then just have, an automation, like a GitHub action, go and create the pull request for you from that. I would love to do that. I already mentioned I would love to maybe customize or allow users to customize the way the tips look. Maybe use something like the PowerShell, what is it, Spectre console, something like that. I know that was demoed a month or two back and looks amazing. So maybe if that could make the tips module look a little nicer, that would be cool, and be able to pick different themes, whatever you like. And then just like we talked about, having a previous switch so that you could see, the last tip that you were shown and maybe be able to go back several versions. Sorry, I was talking there, but if there's anything else, anyone have any other just thoughts on tips, ideas, ways to improve it? You like it, you don't, I don't know.
I'm feeling inclined to want to pitch in and help out. So I'm going to try to jump on this before that gets replaced with some other idea that I have. And then, so I'm going to try to get some tips into you, and then maybe we can work on some format stuff.
Perfect. Also, I love just getting issues or discussions. So if you like have a bug or just a feature request, you don't want to implement it yourself, just open an issue. Or if it's something a little larger, you can do a discussion. Either one. I don't have any hard.
Issues. Are there any issues in there? Do you have any issues?
I try and close them off. Yeah, this is the one. Oh, look at that, Phil Bossman. Yes, awesome. Thank you, Phil. I try and keep all my repos clean of issues if I have the time. But yeah, tips is one that I try and maintain more diligently than some of my older projects. So I take pride in having 0 issues. Darn you, Phil. So yeah, this is just a kick in the pants for me now to get to work and get this off the backlog.
Well, we could certainly work together to try and work through that. But I like the idea, and this is really I saw this before, but I didn't really think of ideas as how to contribute back and try to understand how it's working and probably give back. So this is also a good opportunity for I think for those listening at home and even those online right now is that Dan's been pretty open and easy to work with and or easy to engage with. So certainly if this is something that, hey, I'd like to try and give back to the community as well, this is certainly an opportunity for you to get engaged with the community. So I want to encourage that for everybody who's listening.
Yeah, awesome. I'll also do a shameless plug too. If you do like the module, just go star it on GitHub. Or just leave feedback or whatever. It really is seeing like, because the stars is a type of feedback, it really is getting that feedback from other people, whether on social media or a GitHub star or whatever, that does motivate me to keep building with this. Because like if you build something and you never hear anything from anybody, you don't know if they're using it, if they're enjoying it or whatever, right? I'm not as motivated to spend my time on it. I'd rather go put my my efforts towards some other project. But if I know people are still enjoying this, which I think they are with tips, it just encourages me to contribute more time. And so, yeah, your contributions don't have to be a pull request. If you do a code change and submit a tip, that's great. But just if you have find a bug, have a feature request, just want to say, hey, good job, I love this, you can open an issue even just for that. I just love getting the feedback through any channel. So cool. With that, I think we'll go ahead and just jump into how to actually contribute a tip. So let's see how to do this. Okay, so yes, so for you to do it at home, you would have to fork the repository. There should be a fork button up here. Yeah, there it is, fork. So you have to create your own fork, just which will create the tips repo in your GitHub account. So instead of being under Deadly Dog, it'll be under whatever your GitHub username is. From there, you just want to clone the repo to your local machine. So you just grab the URL, do the git clone. Optionally, if you want, you could use a GitHub code space instead. I already have one created. I wasn't sure if we would use it through this demo or not, but if you don't want to clone the repo to your local machine, you can do it in a code space. It's all set up to work. But basically, yeah, once you have the code on your local machine, you can open it in VS Code. Not this one, this one. And this is what it will look like. So let's sort of close everything. So if you follow the instructions on the website, let's go down to the contributing section. So fork the repo, clone it to your local machine, and then run this new PowerShell script. And then basically it's going to create your tip file for you, modify it, commit your changes, and then submit a pull request back to the repo. So this new PowerShell tip script, we hop back to our repository. It's just in the tools directory, new PowerShell tip. You can see at the top it says run this script to create a new PowerShell tip file and open it. So you could just hit F5 to run this script. Because it is in VS Code, though, I also have a task for it. So if you want to just open the command palette, you can say run task. And I have a number of different tasks for tips. There's ones for building it, running pester tests, ensuring all the PowerShell tip file names match their ID, all this sort of stuff. But it is also in here. Oh yeah, it's the very first one, add new PowerShell tip. So you could click this as well, and it'll just run this script for you. So either way you want to run the script, you can do that. And so it's going to ask you, the prompt will open up and ask you, enter the title for your tip. And so I have one pre-prepared. And I can't use Control-B, I guess. So there, so I just gave it a title. So it went ahead and created a new file for me. It dumped it in the source PowerShell tips directory. So it just uses today's date by default. So November 6, 2024. The title I gave it was Join the Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. And so it already puts that in the file name for us. And then you just need to fill out the rest of the file here. So we already have the title defined. I'm going to take this text. Let's take that out and drop this in. That looks kind of ugly, and you can see it's complaining about my single characters, single quotes. So we'll change those to double.
I love your Gremlins tracker. That's a great extension.
Yes, that is.
Yeah. Anybody who blogs knows about that.
Yes. Yeah, so Gremlins, it basically finds like hidden Unicode characters, kind of that type of thing. Things that don't always show up in the editor, but it'll highlight them. And so this is one of them. It's saying like, hey, that's not the proper single quote.
I know there's got to be a way. I wish there was a linter for this Gremlins tracker that, because I'm like you, I get stuck on the same things, those Unicode asterisks, apostrophes and stuff. And I just want to say change them. I don't,
Yeah.
But no, sorry, I digress.
Yeah. For me, I don't have an example here, so I'm just gonna leave this blank. Just an empty string. I have a couple of URLs here. So I said you guys typically meet once or twice a month. I
Yep.
think that
Yep.
still holds true according to our conversations earlier. There's a link to the meetup link. For anyone who didn't know, well, I guess you probably know, but all these videos get put up on YouTube. So there's the YouTube link as well. And oh, I might get in trouble for this one now. There's the Twitter link. So maybe that needs to change to a Blue Sky link. I don't know.
We could put up rtpsug.com in its place.
Yeah.
We do have a website. Phil, I guess we're stuck with these sites forever. Now it's a tip.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or we submit a PR to change them.
Yes, we fix it.
If you want to drop the URL in the chat, I'll fix it right now.
Yeah, it's just rtpsug.com.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Live coding experience.
Cool. So then, yeah, from there you just pick your category, and so it lists them all here. If you're not really sure what each category is for, you scroll down. I have the category meanings here. So this is a social event, community resources, right? So podcasts, user groups. So this particular tip fits under community. I'm just going to go ahead and put community in there, and then in this case, for the author, you can just put your own name or your whatever internet handle or both, like I do. And so you can see I do have some blue squiggles here. We have C spell, like it's a code spell checker installed on this. And so if you don't have that extension, you can install it, but I'm just going to go ahead and add this to the list of ignore words because it'll complain at me during the GitHub Actions build if I don't. There we go. Okay, so yeah, if you don't have that extension installed, that's all right. I mentioned too, you can open this up in a code space. If you do that, it'll actually have some of those extensions installed by default already. So here's the Gremlins one that we mentioned. Here's the code spell checker, YAML markdown all in one. So it'll install these in your code space for you automatically. And I think even if you just open this up in VS Code, it'll prompt you. If you don't have these installed, you'll get a little pop-up saying, hey, it's recommended to install the code spell checker. Do you want to do that? You don't have to, but you can. And then you'll see the squiggles. These are sort of the recommended extensions for this repository. So if you didn't know you could do that, now you know. Just in the .vs code directory, put in extensions.json and drop all your extension IDs in there. But yeah, so we do that, and that's pretty much it. And then so we just need a commit message. I guess normally, I guess if you're on a fork, you don't have to create a branch. Yeah, I'm just going to create
a branch.
Yeah, always create a branch. Just as a good idea.
Yeah, you're raising Sean's blood pressure right there.
Well, that's a good strategy too, right?
Yeah.
So I believe everything should look good. Just going to go ahead and commit that. We'll publish that branch, push it up to GitHub. And then so for you, if you navigated, so after you made your branch, pushed it up to GitHub, just like I have a compare pull request, you would have the same thing. Only mine is going to be saying to sync it into like my main branch. Yours would say from your account's branch into Deadly Dog main is what it would say here. But it's essentially doing the same thing. It's just a pull request into my repo to get it into the main branch. So you'll see I do have like a checklist of stuff here, but you can also see here I say if this PR is simply to add a new tip, remove everything below, it doesn't apply. Because this is if you're actually making code changes to the module itself and how it works. So I'm just going to wipe all that out. We don't really need it. So a brief summary, just add a tip for it's a Triangle PowerShell user group. Good enough. And create our pull request. So when we do this, it's going to do a build and test. If there's any problems, it'll let you know. If there's not, we'll be able to merge it into the main branch and it'll get deployed. I wanted to talk about there. No, I think that's probably it. So yeah, that's essentially the experience of creating a pull request to add a new tip. And so we kind of brushed over this a little bit earlier, but yeah, like when should you contribute a tip? Pretty much any time you've learned something new about PowerShell. Like if you're learning it, there's a good chance that other people didn't know about it too, right? Even if it's something you after you learn it, you might think, this is very basic. I'm sure everybody knows it. Chances are they don't. And so that's a good opportunity to add the tip. If you write your own script, your own module, a GitHub gist, anything that you want to promote, I'm not against shameless self-promotion. So if it's people are going to find it helpful and useful, go ahead, make a tip for it. If you see a PowerShell related post on social media, like total transparency, like I've contributed most of the tips, like probably, I don't know, 45 of the 55, something like that. But the majority of those are things that I saw on social media, like either on Twitter or Mastodon or LinkedIn or wherever. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good tip. And I'd sort of jot it down and then I would come and add it into this repo a little later. So if you see something just cool, yeah, add it. And whenever I would say I do this, I would hope or ask that you do it too, is if you do find something on social media, in the more information, those 3 links that we have, link back to the original social media post as well, just to give the original author like credit because, you know, they shared it to begin with. So just to sort of give back to them a little bit. Yeah, I mean, if you do have a blog, you blog about something PowerShell related, for sure, add a tip, share the blog link. Yeah. And so like, yeah, why would you want to add a tip? It's basically just to help the community grow. It can help you get your name out there. Like people, if people are looking at the author in the tips that show up, like they're going to see my name a lot, but they could see your name too, right? And then, yeah. So it gets your name out there, it just helps the community grow. It helps us all grow together. So I'm just all about knowledge sharing because we often have imposter syndrome. Like even when you're really, say, even when you know a lot, there's still though things that you don't know, and that's why like I love always working with people who are like new to a language or new to a technology, even if I've been entrenched in it for 10 plus years, is because they'll have a different perspective on it. They'll think of a different way of doing something, and just like sharing, like, hey, did you know you could do it this way instead? And I'm like, oh, no, I've been doing it this way for 10 years. I never thought to do it a different way, right? So I love getting those different perspectives and just sharing those tips for everyone. And then, so just a little tip, if you are going to contribute, is just once you have the repository forked and cloned onto your local machine, just leave it there. Like don't delete the fork and don't clean it up. Just have it on your machine. So whenever you want, it's just nice and easy. Oh, fire up VS Code, add your tip, submit the PR. And just avoid that setup work of having to clone the repo every time.
Great stuff.
Cool.
Great stuff. So Phil, a couple things to review here. First of all, Dan cut no corners. He
Oh.
did all the right things with a branch and a commit and no, like, let me just put filler in here because I'm trying to do this quick in a demo. Kudos to him for doing it the right way in the demos. And Dan has big aspirations. Don't delete your forks because he knows you're going to come back and want to add much more tips in the future. And fun fact, everybody, 46 tips, and you are the king of tips for this module. So that's all it takes. So
There you go.
yeah, no.
There you
So
go.
listen, this is a great idea, and I think you know, if you get that GitHub action working, that'll make it even easier. But even doing a PR is a pretty low barrier to entry. I mean, you literally, like you said, you could submit a social media link and it could be a useful tip to someone. So really
Yeah.
easy way for someone to get involved in the community. Really would like to encourage people to help them out here. This is a good idea. And modules like this are only as good as the community makes them. I'm sure Dan has a ton of tips in his head. Maybe Dan has a day job and maybe he's not always thinking about tips. So maybe we want to help him out and add some tips to his module here.
Well,
Yes.
add some tips to the community. More of the
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true. Well, the module that feeds the community, right? So, yeah. So listen, I really enjoyed this. This was really interesting and fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks
Um,
for joining us. Next time we'll make sure that you hear our words. Tips, 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 tips.
so I guess if we have just a few more minutes, or I don't know if that's you're giving me the
No,
the
we're not
cut line.
we're not
Okay.
cutting you off. We're trying to help you out in case you were trying to cut yourself off.
It's one tip. One tip. You only get one tip.
I'll give you a little spoiler preview here because like I've mentioned that whenever I see a tip, I just jot it down, or if I hear one. So this is my like personal note of tips that I still have to add. So like all of these are different things I've seen on social media posts or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff. So you said it exactly right, Mike. You said Dan doesn't have. I have a day job. I don't have unlimited time. I have other things pulling it at for my attention and my time. So yeah, if other people can contribute stuff, that would be wonderful. I do plan to get a lot of that stuff. Like I said, maybe if I can get back to doing like adding one tip a day or something like that, getting my backlog burned down. But yeah, if other people contributed as well, I wouldn't have to. So I would love that.
All right, so listen, a quick little addendum here. 46 is not going to get you to the top of the food pile anymore. Dan's got some queued up here. You gotta come with a serious amount of tips if you want to be king of tips.
Dan laid down the gauntlet. He said 46. I got 46, page 1.
No, I'm happy if people submit one tip that like, yeah, that's all it takes. So, and once you do it once and you've like gone through the steps and you see hopefully that it's not very hard to do, like it only takes 5-10 minutes or whatever. Yeah, then hopefully you'll just be encouraged to do it more often. So, but I don't want to keep everyone too long, so I'm gonna jump ahead. So here I'll just say like I did merge the tip in. You see it showed like code coverage. If there would have been spelling mistakes, they would have showed up here and sort of blocked the pull request. But I went ahead and merged it on through. And the GitHub action is running now, which is going to go ahead and push it out. It'll do the pre-release module version automatically. And then I need to manually approve the stable version. So if you're curious at like what this pipeline looks like, you can just come in. It's all open source. You can look at this. And I mentioned I have that other module, the PowerShell repository template. I created that thing based off of what I did with tips. So I created tips first, took a lot of the lessons I learned, made a template from it. So I'll just plug that quick. But yeah, just because we're getting near the end of time, I'm just going to jump back to the slides real quick. I was going to talk about some more lessons learned from making tips, things like why I wrote it in PowerShell instead of C#, combining all of those tip files into a single JSON file. I guess I'll maybe just show it real quick, but for performance reasons, you can see like all of these tips are individual files, but actually during the build, they get compiled into this PowerShell tips.json file. And this is the thing that actually gets deployed with the module. And I did some ADRs, they're called, architecture decision records, doing some like performance timing and things like that, and just found it's way quicker to read a single file than it is to read 50, 100, 1,000 files. So I'm not going to go over that anymore though than just what I've said right now. So let's skip ahead and I'll just talk about the tips origin story. And like, so where you were asking me at the very start, why did I even think to make tips? Where did this come from? And so I'll say I owe probably the creation of tips to, oh, wait, I'm skipping ahead. Okay. About a year ago, last year, I had a sabbatical with my work. So every 7 years, they give us 7 weeks off. And I took my sabbatical last summer. And every day I would go walk my dogs. And so that's why the dogs are on the screen here. So every day I would go walk the dogs. And I found like, I have nothing to do on my dog walks. Like, what should I do? And I started listening to podcasts, and specifically the PowerShell podcast. So big shout out to the PowerShell podcast and Andrew Plaw, Jason Hammond. I started from episode 1, listened to every single episode. I still do. And they were just talking all the time about like the community, how great it is, how good it is to give back. PowerShell is so awesome. And, I had 7 weeks off and I was like, what am I going to do? I'm kind of bored. And so they inspired me to create the tips module. It's just my way of giving back to the community. I was looking for a project to create and I thought, why not this thing? So just more pictures of my dogs. So every day I would walk my dogs, listen to the PowerShell podcast because I was catching up on like the 100 episodes or whatever that they had. That's where the inspiration really came from for me to create tips. So I also, I made this 6 months ago, but I just also wanted to throw out a huge shout out and congratulations to Andrew Plough for becoming a PowerShell MVP. Totally deserves it. Awesome that he got recognized. I know this summer there was a whole bunch of people actually I've seen on social media got recognized as PowerShell MVPs. So kudos to all of you if you got recognized. I know it shouldn't be something you strive for, but like I said, I've been blogging about PowerShell for over 10 years. And I know back in the 2013, 2014 era, I really, I wanted to become a PowerShell MVP. It shouldn't be the goal, but I'm like, it would feel so nice. But I wasn't involved in the community, right? I was creating a bunch of stuff. I was blogging, making modules, all this sort of stuff, but I wasn't sharing it on social media. I wasn't getting noticed. I wasn't connecting with people, right? And it is the connection. It's these user groups that sort of really, really makes the experience so much better. But so me creating the tips module is then what actually led to Andrew had me on the podcast last December. I think it was the 100th episode actually. But then he also actually inspired me to submit a talk for the PowerShell DevOps Global Summit, which I'll plug that right now too. The call for papers is still open for that for another 9 days until November 15th, right? We're looking for speakers, looking for sessions, talks. I had never given a presentation outside of my work before. I had done lots in my work, but never really, outside to an outside audience. But I submitted a few talks, or a couple talks, and one got chosen, and I went to the PowerShell Global Summit. And yeah, it was amazing. I got to meet a lot of the people here on the call today in person, see your face, shake your hand. I'm up in Canada, so I don't get to, we don't really have a very big PowerShell user group presence here, I'll say. And I know, you mentioned, Mike, sometimes you guys host these meetings in your office building. So there's quite a few of you, it sounds like, that are within close physical proximity. I don't have that. So the summit was a really great opportunity to meet everybody. And that's actually where I met James Brundage as well. And he's the one who nominated me to become a PowerShell MVP and how I got my MVP status a couple months back. So yeah, I'm just super grateful. And the community just following, listening to the podcast, coming to the user groups, seeing the presentations. There really is so much more out there to learn than if you just sort of stay in your silo. And just connecting with people, asking, hey, how do you guys solve this problem? I know, we were just talking about it before this recording started, hey, how do you guys start a blog? Or, I'm running into this issue, what should I do? Or whatever, right? Those conversations are something I never realized how valuable they were and how much I would enjoy them until I had them, going to the PowerShell Summit and whatnot. And so, anyways, yeah, I'm rambling on, but I just wanted to say, I really do enjoy the user group. That's where tips came from. It led to me going to the PowerShell Summit, led to me becoming an MVP, and it all just started with wanting to give back to the community. And I didn't think tips would be anything. I was just making it for me. But then a lot of people said, hey, this is a cool idea. I like this. And yeah, so if you have a similar idea, or you're thinking of some project, some script, something, and you're not sure, should I put this out there? Just do it. Whether it's a blog post or a module or whatever, if you've made something internally for work, just, make it, genericize it so that it could be used for anybody, not just your work specifically. And yeah, put it out there, open source, and see what comes from it. Announce it on social media, share it, and maybe do a presentation here on it. Yeah, I don't know. Good things come from the community is, I guess, what I'm getting at. So,
Amen.
Yeah, with that, that's pretty much all I had. I guess the other thing I did want to shout out is the profiler module. because tips does start with every PowerShell session. Like you have to import it. I didn't, when I originally made it, it took like 5 seconds it added to your PowerShell startup time, and that was horrible. But using Profiler, I got it down to, I think, 200-300 milliseconds. I was going to demo it, like just wrap it in a measure command statement, the import tips module statement, but you guys can do it for yourself and see how much time it's adding, but it shouldn't be very much, like 300 milliseconds. So,
Awesome.
and
Nice.
yeah, with that, that's my talk. So.
Well, there you go. You're jumping right into the last slide. Is we're looking for is if anybody was looking for how to find you and basically how to contribute back. We kind of talked about how to re-engage with the module itself, but to actually engage with you directly, Dan. So this is perfect. There's your stuff on the screen, Deadly Dog, and a bunch of great stuff, and slide decks will be available. Awesome.
Yeah. So Dan, first of all, I want to say thank you for coming and sharing some information with us. This was, to me, very entertaining tonight. You know, we talked about the tips module, but there's a lot of hidden gems that people got to see: how to do a commit, how to do a PR, and learn about code spaces and a little bit of VS Code stuff. And so lots of good stuff to learn tonight. Hey, Phil, do you listen to the PowerShell podcast?
I do listen to the PowerShell
Yeah.
podcast. I actually
Did
heard
you?
myself on it.
Did you hear the most recent episode? It's a good one.
It's
I
a very
would
good one.
highly recommend people listen to episode 143. I heard it was a good one.
143. It was a
Yeah,
great one.
143. Yeah. All right. So, Dan, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. I have some ideas for you that I'll save for after we hit stop on the recording. But thank you so much for sharing with us. I think this was quite entertaining. And just parting thought here, man, you know, Dan mentioned way back earlier that he got a donation for doing some stuff he did open source, and I was going to ask him at the time, and I didn't. I'm sure it was probably an awesome feeling to get a donation for your work, but you know, as someone else who does open source stuff, and we all do a little bit of that, man, just like seeing stars on a repo or someone saying, hey, thanks, or just seeing the downloads on your module, it really helps the people that create this stuff have the energy to keep going. So, you know, this is a super easy way to help this community keep going. Contribute a tip, something you learned in your daily workflows that you think can help others. The worst thing that could happen is you submit the tip and Dan says, hey, we already got that tip already. But it's a really easy way for you to be a part of our community. And so we really hope that you take some time and participate and contribute to Dan's manual. Dan, thanks so much for sharing today. I think we had a fantastic session today. Phil, what'd you think?
I think I'm already engaged. I already got my PR.
Same here. I got things open. So hopefully we'll see some stuff there. Thanks again, Dan, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.